My name is Nick Swayne. I'm the founding director of JMU XLabs, and JMU XLabs is part of James Madison University. We're located in the beautiful Shenandoah Valley of Virginia. It's a rural, primarily undergraduate serving institution. We have about 20,000 students. And we, like many of us, we kind of think of ourselves as one of the flyover institutions that, everybody kind of flies over us. And yet we've established JMU XLabs as a world-class innovation space that's created partnerships with state and federal agencies, global companies, nonprofits, think tanks, and universities globally. Our work has been cited in the Chronicle of Higher Ed, Wired Magazine, and the Financial Times, all sort of small publications you might have heard about. Our partnerships are built on digital hybrid platforms, and those platforms have enabled us to grow and extend well beyond the physical presence of our campus. In many ways, we were well situated to transition to pandemic education. In fact, many of the things that we did were used by more traditional faculty to make that jump. One of the great things about this conference that we learn, and as kind of one of our hypotheses, was that partnerships are the core of the future of higher ed. And so those partnerships need to exist between and across sectors, not just within higher ed. And we propose that regional universities must become hubs of innovation that address the shock of complex, massive global problems at the regional level. We need to address those partnerships and into this to follow through. We're going to give you a bit of history, a little bit, let you know a little bit about where we are now, and ask for some help. And at the end, we'll take some questions. So can one of you start us off with a little history?
Well, I'm here, so I'll, when I think about the JMU XLabs and what distinguishes us, a bit of a buzzword comes to mind. So give me a thumbs up if you know what transdisciplinary means. Thumbs down if you've never heard that word. Okay, so I don't have to go over that definition for many of the folks in the room. Transdisciplinary work is when folks work together across disciplines for a synergistic outcome to achieve something they couldn't have achieved otherwise. So now that we have that shared definition, also recognize that in the JMU XLabs, we do transdisciplinary slightly different than how folks may do it elsewhere. So I'll just call out those characteristics because for me, that's really at the heart of what we do. I'm faculty in the School of Nursing and also lead faculty in the JMU XLabs. So you may not think about nursing coming into innovation spaces as much. And that's part of why this transdisciplinary element is so essential to me. Part of what we do that's slightly different than how others might do transdisciplinary work is that we have non-adjacent disciplines work together. So you all know that when transdisciplinary folks work together, there's divergent thinking that happens that can't happen otherwise. And that happens somewhat when nurses and doctors work together, but when nurses and statisticians and engineers all work together, that happens in a big way.
And writers.
And writers, or, as an example, when folks from non-adjacent disciplines work together, a whole new thing happens. And so that's part of key to what we do. And you might be surprised to know that we don't allow students to take our classes unless there's a faculty member from that discipline who is a faculty member teaching the course. And the reason for that is we're not a divide and conquer kind of space. We model this transdisciplinary conversation, the tensions that happen, that productive discourse that you might see some of here today, every day in class with all faculty attending each course, each class. And what that does, in my view, is creates these wicked students who are working on problems that can actually get out of university and go work in a place of employment and work together on a team and value that diversity and talk across disciplinary boundaries. So for me, it's that transdisciplinarity that is really key to some of our work.
Erica, can I piggyback on what you were saying? You mentioned a term that I think is really important, the wicked student. And so when I think of wicked, and we think of, we have wicked education in our title, and yeah, we're from Harrisonburg, not from Boston. Wicked in this case is those like, it's a technical term for a problem that is too big to solve by one discipline alone. They are systematic problems, and so examples might be, climate change, it might be homelessness, it might be pandemics. And so when we talk about wicked problems, it is a systems level approach, which means you can't have a single discipline working by themselves. And so this aspect is really important. So when we talk about that transdisciplinarity, we're also talking about these wicked problems. So the students have this gravity of the problems that we're working on. The faculty have the gravity of the problems that we're working on. And that's a really, that's a key element to this kind of education. In addition to that, I would also piggyback to say that because we have these different disciplines and different sectors and different partners, there's not a one-size-fits-all innovation framework. So when we say that we're problem solving, we know we're not solving a wicked problem. We're working on aspects of that, and we're taking elements that we need from design thinking, from lean startup, from agile, and we're remixing them in ways that students, faculty, partners, administrators all become the innovators together, and that is another kind of example of that transdisciplinarity. I love this model, and I get really jazzed about this model, and I want to talk about this model all the time. And I want to articulate that Erica and I started in 2015. We conned Nick into letting us teach together. He didn't know we were good friends ahead of time. And so we've been slow rolling this and getting this going. And in 2019, we were starting to make some impact, and we were starting to get this message out, and things were looking really great. We had some invitations to come consult with universities, and things were feeling so good. And then, March 2020, pandemic hits, and we are in the midst of teaching these hands-on, prototype-heavy, you gotta put the wires together to do stuff kind of things. And now all of our students are at home, and so we had this moment of oh my gosh, how are we?
Sheer panic.
So we're not just at home. Their projects were locked in a closet, and the president said, "Don't come back to campus. Don't go in the buildings." And so all this stuff is locked out. We're really locked out.
Yeah, and so we had some beginning technology infrastructure happening there, and so that was going to work pretty well. But what we started hearing more and more is that our community members, they were losing livelihood. And so we looked to our model and we're like, oh my gosh, this model has to be doing more work. And Sean, you really jumped in and led this kind of pivot for the lab, for the XLabs. Can you talk about that a little bit?
Yeah, sure. So, hi everyone, I'm Sean McCarthy. I'm a writing studies professor, but I'm also a lead instructor along with these three. We're kind of a weird family of sorts at this stage. We've been kind of working at this for a number of years. But I was teaching a course in writing studies about technology, and everything shut down. And of course, loads of organizations around us are also shutting down, including the local farmers market in Harrisonburg, which is a marketplace for up to 80 different vendors that, the major part of their livelihood was through this market. And the market shut down by state order unless you went hybrid. But the makeup of the market is mostly Mennonite farmers, right? So it's an area that is strongly Mennonite. It's a rich cultural tradition of the area. It really kind of infuses the whole area. We're called the Friendly City, largely because of our Mennonite background. But they weren't ready to pivot to an online platform. In fact, technology is kind of against their value systems in many ways. And so how were we going to be able to get to market their products and keep their livelihoods going? So we decided to try and make the XLabs model really kind of move out quickly into the community. I got my students working on it. We had the lab manager as a kind of an operations manager. We worked with the city. We worked with the police department. We worked with a local technology company and an e-commerce vendor in Oregon. Oregon, and we basically got a hybrid model of the market going in 3 weeks, where we put on online stores for every single one of the vendors, and we used the market as a safe pickup point. And so there was this massive operation that came together really quickly in one way, but was really building on the kinds of methods that we were teaching our students inside in in our classes kind of every week. And so it really got us thinking about the XLabs, not just as a teaching-centric model, but as a problem-solving model that could work both locally and regionally when needed, right? And one thing that I think that really speaks to the theme of this conference, which is like partnerships, we're talking about the global Silicon Valley. Well, the global Silicon Valley is not going to work unless there are local regional hubs of innovation where we can make those connections and solve those problems together, right? So alongside the GSV, global Silicon Valley, we need a global Shenandoah Valley as well, and many other kinds of valleys too, right? So like it's really important, I think, to be able to create local and regional hubs of innovation, and the teaching model that we've been developing with our students kind of was very adaptable towards that, and that's what we're really thinking about now is, okay, we have a successful teaching model going where we can do the transdisciplinary work that Erica was talking about, and we can connect with all these different partners in a kind of a structured course way. What would it be like to think about ourselves as a hub of innovation, both for the local area and for the region, where we could solve problems and kind of seize opportunities together as we sort of deal with the kinds of systemic shocks that we've had to deal with the pandemic and the many that will roll from it. So we've been thinking about that, and we've got a couple of ideas about ways that units of innovation at regional universities could really kind of mobilize to become hubs of innovation that connect GSV global to GSV local, right? And Nick, do you want to start us off with just one of the kind of like aspects of that model?
So I really run the infrastructure part of the lab. And as we transition from this, collaborative model, everybody's face-to-face working around a table, into this lockout model, we discovered very quickly that we don't have the tools. And so one of the things that is really, I think, critical for other universities to model is to create a skunkworks, a place where you can try things out, develop new ideas, and develop products and programs. And that when I reached out to our technology partners, the only pathway that's open is to biz dev. Biz dev is code for sales. And so if you don't have the tools that I need, and I'm willing to work with you to develop those tools, there is no pathway for me to reach into those companies to develop new tools. And so again, you're gonna hear more about this, but there's a huge market that tech is missing by flying over schools that by and large look like us and not talking to us about anything more than sales. So if the university is able to and willing to create these sort of skunkworks models that don't operate by the same rules that everybody else does, then you can create these partnerships with other parts of the university and also with tech that you're able to bring those things back, and it's a win-win for everyone.
And you're doing that right now, right?
We're doing that now. Like I now have partnerships with Dell and Logitech and others that realize that the things that we're identifying actually don't exist in the marketplace, and that there's a lot of folks out there that want them, and so we're able to do that now.
If I could just build from that, because the technology is essential and being able to get to the right folks on that end, and then there's the other end about the relationships and the relationships with those community partners, and we valued that even before the pandemic. Knowing, and many of you likely do too. Knowing that you can't just send your students in, do a project that benefits the students, and get out of there, right? It's about relationship. It takes time to cultivate the type of problems that are interesting enough for students to work on, that bring meaning to their work, that don't just have a single easy solution. It takes time to build the trust with the community agency. And Sean, you gave this good example of how that spun up kind of quickly, but what wasn't necessarily as apparent in the story was that you had done work in the past with the United Way and had traction in the community that you could really leverage to make some of that happen. And so what part of how the pandemic changed that view, strengthened that view, was twofold. We really recognize the value of being able to bridge between the technology and have that relationship already with our community. And how game-changing might it be to be able to not only do that for our regional universities, but for other folks to do that also. So when I think about that, I think of sitting at home and having to adapt to new technologies every day for a while at the university. But how privileged was it that I had those technologies to adapt to? How privileged and stressful was it that I had those to adapt to? And what we saw in our current partnerships with our community agencies is that they didn't necessarily have those same technologies. So we can span that bridge at times for folks. And I think the meaning of that really deepened for us during the pandemic. I don't know, is that what you all experienced?
Yeah, for sure. I mean, I think as well, if we're going to develop that kind, to be able to leverage those technologies, we also have to think about ourselves as a university as an innovation organism. And I don't think it's any secret that higher ed has got under a lot of flack for not being able to pivot quickly enough, and also to not think very nimbly and thinking about the future. So many of us are going back to this kind of pastoral fantasy,
and not just related to the pandemic.
Right. Yeah. I mean, we're going back face to face like nothing happened, many of us, and how realistic is that moving forward? So we really need to develop cultures of innovation on campus to be able to kind of intentionally and systematically be innovative. And one thing that we tried this year, kind of based out of the work that we've been doing with community partners, is to take the courses that we've been teaching, using innovation methods to teach our students as a way to solve university problems. So I led a course in the spring called The Future of Learning at JMU, where we had administrators, faculty, graduate students, and undergraduate students, all using kind of design methods like scenario planning and design fiction to think about the future of learning 10 years out. And so that course, we presented our findings to the upper administration. We also presented to the Board of Visitors. And it was a really great experience to be able to think systematically into the future rather than have it happen to us, right? And it was a good experience. But I think the most valuable thing that we pulled from it was that when we make decisions about the future of education, who don't we include? The students. Right, we're always making decisions for them, and parents do. But in this case, we were really trying to include the students as a voice in thinking about what the future of the institution was going to be. And I'd really like to see more of that work happening, where we have, just as we teach regular courses to students that teach certain methods or certain kinds of content, that there are courses that are about university problems or opportunities where we can bring stakeholders together to sit with a problem for 15 weeks and really go at it in a creative way. So that would be my kind of
as I'm listening to this and as I think about the work and experiencing it from a instructor perspective, when these tend to be super powerful moments, right? You are taking this work, Erica, in medical innovations that I've taught with you. We're taking this work and we're really working toward transforming students, but not just students, also faculty members, also community partners. We are working on humans. And so it's resource intensive, high risk, high reward kind of moment. And so when I think about this, I also think about what's the sustainability of any of this in any institution. It is hard work. So I tend to think about what's the evidence that we're creating value for the students, we're creating value for ourselves, we're creating value in the university and with our partners. And so that does come down to some assessment, some research, some things like that people might not be really excited about. But one of the things is like, this is so important, and we're not just us, people that are working in this sphere are looking at learning in a different way, which means we need different metrics of success. And those metrics are often relational. They are between the humans that are participating in this. And we don't have a really succinct way of, yes, there's social network analysis. And let me just tell you that we use Slack in our classes. And I never introduced myself. I'm Patrice Ludwig. I'm a biology professor. And I like studying things like this. But I study dung beetles, right? I'm not a computer scientist. And so in order to get the information that I needed, I taught myself what a JSON file was. I scraped Slack. I made a network. I read all the network analysis books. I put something together, and I did that for one team for 1 week. That took me 3 months. And we have 15 weeks of a semester and at least 20 teams, 25 teams operating.
50 last semester.
In a semester. I am looking for, you're looking for infrastructure. I'm also looking for that infrastructure. Like, who do I work with to change the game of assessment? How do we know that this is working? These metrics are a lot different. And it's big data, and it's data analytics, and it's really exciting, and it's not my field. And so, as I'm sitting here thinking about this, go ahead, Nick.
So, and I would just say that team and relationship metrics and the effectiveness of that obviously have dual use. And yet good metrics, good ways of analyzing that don't exist. We at least we haven't found them.
Efficient at our level. That's, so part of that culture, I would argue that maybe we're not, our title said post-pandemic. I would say in pandemic. I'm not post-pandemic yet. But part of that culture of innovation is also figuring out if what we're doing is working, and then how do we make sure that that's sustainable? How do we make sure that there's the investment is worth our time?
And how can that data change what we're doing in real time? Like, if we are able to see social network analysis maps of the way that teams are working, and we can feed that back to students and teach them, like, okay, like this isn't, this team is like not functioning compared to that team. There's really like powerful pedagogical ways that I think that like data analysis could feed into this kind of teaching method, right?
Yeah. So one of the things that I like to do, I don't know if everybody likes to do it. Wanted to also mention that it's not just social network stuff. We're also trying to analyze writing, and a lot of writing. And so natural language processing, something like that. Anybody out there? So one of the things that we do is there's a lot of reflection. And so I've learned as a biologist, I hated reflection, and I really didn't like people very much. But now I'm deeply embedded in both of those things. So when I'm thinking about this stuff, one of my favorite reflection tools is I wish, and I wonder. And so, I can go beyond. I love this work. I wish that I had partners lined up that aren't going to charge me a fortune, but we can be collaborative in developing methods. And I wonder what that means for our students and how fast we can move the needle on this kind of innovation education. Do you all think about I wish, I wonders at all, maybe?
I think my wish would probably be that as institutions, we go back to the heart of what we do, which is the classroom experience, or more broadly learning as a way to solve problems, rather than doing it by committee, to do it together in spaces where we're designing together, where all the stakeholders are there, including students, using methods that we know that work, and spending some time with problems rather than writing reports about them.
Well, I'm really interested in what your I wish, I wonders are in the space, and hearing questions from you. And I guess also to add my own, one of the things that brings me great hope is that there are more than 4,000 institutions similar to James Madison University out there that are well positioned to move into this regional hub of innovation space. And maybe you're one of them, or maybe you're...
want to partner with one of them.
or want to partner with one of them, and maybe you're currently flying over and ready to make a stop. I don't know. But what I guess I wonder is, what would it look like if we develop those partnerships, and what would it look like if we, folks of us who have begun to gather some experience in that space got together and then had some resources from outside, agencies to build some synergy on what we've started, and to truly develop other institutions. Because we get calls from institutions who are interested in developing this, and would really love to be able to, I wonder what we could accomplish if we had the resources to do more work like that, developing these hubs in other universities.
Yeah, so I wish we had or could develop better connections into the development community to develop the tools that we need. And there's here we see a whole lot of folks pitching products. Many of them are interesting, but not what we need. And so I want to be able to tell you what we need, and then work with you so that you create those tools that can be shared by everyone, and don't charge me $100,000 to develop a tool that you're going to sell to everybody else. Like we should be able to work together as partners. And so that's one. And the other thing is as Erica said earlier, it takes a long time to find problems, curate them, and kind of stack them up. It takes about a year to get that process. And there's really no good system for queuing up those problems and then doing the matchmaking with faculty. So those are a couple of things that I wish for.
Unless the pandemic lands in your lap, and then you get a problem pretty quick.
Yeah. So there are some lap problems that we can work. And right now we'd like to quickly transition to hearing from you.
Yeah, if you've got any questions or any thoughts or ideas about partnerships. I don't think we're allowed to bring down mics, but if you want to stand and just so that everybody can hear it, we'd love to hear your ideas or questions.
My name is Lloyd. I work both in Tucson and in Tokyo, and I'm with a social enterprise organization that's using, and I'm just curious if you'd be interested in this, along the lines of the last two comments that were made. We're using the virtual exchange and COIL, collaborative online international learning pedagogy, connected with technology to build a brand new network of entrepreneurship centers and innovation labs around the world, both in their curricular design, but also in their extracurricular work with students in terms of the things that they're exploring and building. And we have a number of institutions that are looking to join this network. The University of Hawaii is kind of one of the headquarters, but Manhattan Innovation Labs, Michael Archer is working with us on this too. And I would just be curious if this would be something that you guys would
Absolutely. And I think Michelle Estes does a lot of that work with.
Michelle, and we also worked in the past when they were still there at JMU with Lee Sternberger and Craig Shealy, who are now at Western Washington.
Yeah, for sure.
Yeah. Yes, we are.
What else?
Any other ideas or questions or thoughts? Hi.
Hi, my name is Natasha Nates. I'm from San Diego State University. When you said that the tools are missing that you need, can you give us some examples of the technology or tools that you need that aren't out there?
Sure. So the faculty here represent what is fairly common team. So nursing, writing, and biology. And we may be having students work on a microprocessor, Arduino, or a Raspberry Pi, and oftentimes many of the students, even the engineering students at work, have never seen one, and so they're working on that. And how do you work on something like a Raspberry Pi to develop a solution when nobody's ever seen one? And a Raspberry Pi is, a good one's $50. I can afford to spend the money to buy one for every team. But when I have a class of 25 or 30 students, I can't afford that. And the time lag prevents that. So how do we collaborate the tool necessary to make it so that all the members of the team feel like they're collaborating on the product of this prototype, when they can't touch it, can't see it, and never had.
I would just say, I mean, imagine the nurse on that team too, perhaps not even knowing what Raspberry Pi was initially. And then when we're in a classroom, it feels really different to be able to all surround it and get your hands on it. And then when you take that online, there's a loss. It's not, telling them, hey, watch a YouTube video and then start tinkering around at home isn't the same level of engagement. So it's that level that we're looking for.
Yeah, I was going to. You can tinker CAD on Arduino and do a lot of things and make it. But there's something about like when a biology student has to take this wire and do this. Like there's a level of commitment there, that they've never had to make, and so we assure them that you're not going to blow anything up. But like that's a thing right there, and so and that builds confidence. Then we're sending them out into the world to be more confident in their abilities. So there is something to being able to watch what your engineering peer is doing, and then you do it. And then you take it one step further and demonstrate that you've really internalized that lesson.
And the friction that comes from, there's the friction and tension that comes from the different disciplines working together. And I can't, so there's, and I don't know what the answer is, if it's gender, discipline, whatever, but when you watch this happen and you see the male engineer say, oh, I got it, and they jump to the solution right away, and the nursing students or the biology students say, wait a minute. Or the guys will say, oh, you can't do that.
I mean, they'll say that didn't work. Here's what we should do instead, which is the game change, right?
And so it's game changer where you have that level of discussion when it's dynamic and happening in real time.
So being able to facilitate that in sort of
facilitating all that tools.
All that
and I think that is a requirement in industry as well. If you look at the industry travel that happens, like where my daughter works is at a medical technology company, they prototype stuff and then they call in the user interface guys are in Ireland, the software guys are in India, the precision tool guys are in Germany, and they used to bring those guys in every 4 months to sit together and figure this out. You can't do that anymore. And so how does industry, and I was just on a call with her walking over here, like she's asking me questions about it. So I think those kinds of tools of collaboration are universally absent from education and industry, and so does that answer the question?
What else? Sorry, did you have something to add?
Yeah. I don't know if you recognize me. I'm Jack Hammerstein.
I do now. Recognize the voice, yeah.
I lived in Harrisburg, known a lot of these people for 20 years. I'm really curious. I've been part of ed tech R&D teams. I've also been part of higher ed sales teams, and I've always thought it's sort of fantastically corrupting. If I understood you right, you call up a company, you call up a vendor saying, I'm interested in this need, I want to explore this thing. They send out a sales rep.
Yes.
And they claim to be customer-centric, blah, 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 but they've done all their development. Their sales team wasn't part of the development. Their sales team isn't from higher ed. And you have to talk to a sales rep and try to assess whether this is going to work for you. And the whole client centricity, as long as it's mediated by a sales rep, feels like a lie to me. Like, how do you have the people who actually have the need talk to the actual developers so that there's...
Well, I'd say it took us 5 years to get there. The XLab first class was in 2015. In 2019-20, we started creating our own technology and hacking things together. And then when I started hacking things together, it was like a bunch of hardware components that no one had assembled together in that way. And then I showed it was Dell, right? I showed Dell, like, I took all your components, put them together in a way, like I literally ratchet strapped things together, and then showed them, and everyone that comes in says, genius. Like, we would love to buy one of those, and Dell isn't selling it. And so when you start to make those connections, then Dell's like, okay, maybe we should pay attention. So it's not easy, but that's where I'd say, like, you gotta have an intentional skunkworks kind of program that gets to operate off-grid within the institution, or you never get there. Because if I had to go through all the processes of getting my department head to say it's okay to talk to Dell, and then the dean, and then the legal guys. Like, I can just call the guy at Dell now and have those kinds of conversations.
It's really about partnership as a learning space.
And the
that's
relationship.
the same thing, right? It's just like whether it's with students or with faculty or administrators or community partners and technology companies. It's just like the fundamental basis of it is like, let's learn together about how to do this rather than you sell me one thing.
And I mean, if there's a person from ed tech in the room,
Any ed tech guys?
or lady bosses, like why are you sending us your salespeople? Or why are you sending us your salespeople? Why not the R&D folks? What do you think?
Well, we're too early to have salespeople. So.
Why are other people?
We need to talk because we can help you develop some stuff. Yeah.
Well, Nick, you did just give the case for necessity is the mother of invention.
Yeah.
Any other thoughts or?
Sorry, let me just jump in real fast. That's me. So I'm the guy that he calls it Dell.
I can't read your. Yeah. Okay.
So I'm actually a strategist. So one of the things that I get the leeway to do is to talk to Nick and say,
I've only seen him on a Zoom, so it's like, oh yeah,
You have actually talked to him.
okay,
Oh, okay.
Jeffrey Lancaster, right there, yeah,
so thank you for the shout out.
yeah.
But with any of these, the bigger the corporation gets, the harder it is to navigate, and the harder it is to find the right people to be talking to. And so the salesperson is that first point of contact, fortunately or unfortunately. But then when it gets to somebody like me, I can say, hey, let's bring in Logitech, or hey, let's connect you to our product group. And then it's a matter of just wayfinding. And I think that's hard to do. So the benefit that smaller companies have is less wayfinding, right? It's easier to connect into that machine in some way. You just need I think the business case to be able to do it. And what's great about what you're doing at XLabs is they've already made the case for it. It's very easy to say, they're already using it. How can we then take that, support them, and potentially support other higher customers too?
There was a question here. Yeah.
I'm Andy Harvick, also here at Patrice. I also know many people. I'm wondering if you could speak a little bit about the students that come into the program. Like, what disciplines are they coming out of? Is it an elective? Do they, are they required to take the class?
Yeah. So we hacked the system. And so we did it accidentally, like it wasn't intentional. But once we did it, it was like, we figured out a way. So the key is independent studies and topics courses, right? So when we get together, they each form like a nursing topics course, a writing topics course, and a biology topic course, and then we bring them together and mix the students up on teams.
So we co-locate them. So that we set the course for the same time in the same room. So it actually isn't a course. It's a network of courses that are all meeting in the same place. All of the students are getting credit for their individual majors or whatever they're setting up for, but they're all being evaluated and working together on the problems that we set for them. They get major credit because they have to. Otherwise, there's no way you can socially engineer that. Like, you can't just have like XLabs 301, right? And expect
it has to be part of
a
something.
mix of engineers, nursing students, biology students, writing students, sometimes theater students, right? You're not going to get that mix, so you have to engineer it. So that's why you bring the faculty member and a small section, and then you co-locate them at the same time, and they're all in individual course numbers, but from the very get-go, we're operating as a class, and the faculty team is also a team. So they're operating as a team, and then we distribute the students so that you've got a biologist, a writing student, a nursing student, an engineer, and a theater student all working together, and then they work on a particular problem, or they develop the problem statement themselves, depending on how it goes. But that's the fundamental architecture of making it work.
Yep.
Yeah.
Technical, whatever it is. Like, I work it under a practicum. Some people do individual, what you call those?
Curriculum instruction review and get it approved.
That's how it works.
And they are from across campus. There's every college.
Every college, every major has been represented in a class.
Arts, sciences, social sciences, humanities, you name it. Like, we have, and the more diverse we can create the teams, because that's the value we bring to our partners, right? Is like, okay, you're going to be working with undergrads, but we mightn't solve your problem, but we're going to bring this amazing array of perspectives to it, right? And this kind of beginner's mindset that the students bring, but also the expertise of the faculty. And we're going to sit with your problem for 15 weeks. Now, who in the real world gets to sit with anything for 15 weeks? Nobody, right? But instead, you've got this bunch of people who have a set of methods where we learn to work together. We know how to go at, through the design methods that we use. We can create prototypes for them that they can say, "Oh wow, that's an amazing idea. It doesn't really work, but it's really got me thinking about something," right? So that's the way that it works, and that's the value.
That process also gets around. Any university folks here? University. So have you ever gone through a C&I review, or a curriculum instruction review, where you're trying to get a new class approved? It is mind-numbingly challenging. So the hack is by doing these independent studies, you can run them for a couple years. No, we never run the same class, so you can keep running them in perpetuity. Without having to go through a C&I. I mean, if you're working on a real relevant problem, it's real and relevant now, but in 3 years it's not. So if you have to go through a C&I review, no one would ever do it. So that was also kind of a hack that we didn't expect we didn't anticipate. Yeah.
There's a red thing beeping. So
We've got a few more minutes if.
I think we should let folks go who want to go, and then continue conversation afterwards.
But thank you so much for.
There's nobody else coming in the room, so we can keep talking if they.
Thank you. Thank you all.